Thank you, Alex. Again, thanks everyone for being here so early. We are here at Bitspiration. We hear a lot about skills and techniques for managing your startup, your product development, your investor relations. But one of the areas that's often overlooked is skills and techniques for managing the ultimate hardware and software of any startup, which is yourself. We're in the middle of quite a few startup founder communities, and we're close with the Y Combinator Founders Network, and it's amazing how often those things have been coming up in recent discussions. So this is going to be a very vulnerable, but hopefully a very valuable talk for you. It cost us to be talking about it, but we think it's an important topic to talk about. So
So it's always fun to give a talk with Ela because it takes like a full 2 minutes to introduce her, and then they're like, oh, and here's Seth. So yeah, my name's, it's fair. My name's Seth Bannon. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Amicus. We make tools for nonprofits and political campaigns. And so my entrepreneurial journey actually started at a pretty young age. When I was super young, my mom was sort of the great activist hero in my life because she would do things that were actually quite small but seemed like a big deal at the time. If she thought a law was unjust, she'd get our neighbors together to write letters to our congressperson. Or my favorite thing is if she ever saw someone cutting in line at the supermarket, she would always march over and say, excuse me, I saw that, this person was in front of you. And so, when you're 10, you're like, my God, my mom's a crime-fighting superhero. And then when I was 12, we were living in a house that was powered by propane gas, and there was a leak and a spark and an explosion, and she was in the house at the time and hit the ceiling and hit the floor and was left with permanent nerve damage and brain damage and was permanently disabled after that. And so she would then see these things that used to upset her but wouldn't be able to do what she used to do about it. And it would really depress her and hence really depress me. So I started doing these things for her. I'd say, hey, Ma, I wrote Congresswoman Delora. Or if I ever saw someone cutting in line, I'd stop them and run home and tell my mom. And that was all well and good. And it actually led me into the world of nonprofits because I realized that there were a lot of other people in the world who, like my mom, were faced with some sort of injustice but couldn't do anything about it themselves. So I started a couple nonprofits. I worked for political campaigns. I worked for President Obama when he ran in 2008. And essentially from day one, I was incredibly frustrated with the state of technology in that space. I didn't understand why it was 10 years behind the video games I was playing. And then later in life, 10 years behind the social networks I was using. And so after many years of whining about it, I think my friends just got tired of hearing me complain. And I started to hear things like, if you have so many great ideas, why don't you fix it? So I said, oh, me fix it? That's a novel idea. And that's how Amicus got started. Basically, from the beginning, it was going pretty well. We built a tool. People liked it. They paid us money for it. We were able to raise a small seed round of $600,000. We applied to Y Combinator, this really prestigious accelerator in Silicon Valley. We got in. We went through it. We raised $3.2 million more. While we were there, we lived in the Facebook house, the same house that Mark Zuckerberg lived in when he was in Silicon Valley. CNN sent a camera crew to cover our startup. We then moved back to New York. We got this beautiful Soho loft office space, really cool space. We had a giant hammock. We had 15 people. The Economist, one of my childhood favorite magazines, covered us. I got invited to speak at conferences in places like, Warsaw or South by Southwest or Vienna, some really exotic places, and it seems like it's going really well. Your friends and your family are starting to understand exactly what you're doing and saying, oh, wow, he's actually doing cool stuff. And I'm going to leave it there. That's just one side of the story, and so we'll come back to that later.
So some of you here probably know me from the tech scene, but just to recall quite a few things that I did. In 2006, I started with my co-founders a software house. I was then involved in some developer events, Mobile Conf and Railsberry, work with a team of amazing people. Was lucky enough to co-found a company called Base, which is right now run by my co-founders, and they're doing amazing things. And I applied to Y Combinator with the project called Predictive and got in as first Polish founders. And I later decided to try my luck and learn some investment skills. So I joined Poland's prominent early stage investment fund, Innovation Nest. I decided that I missed operations, so I started getting involved with a New York startup, Amicus, because I wanted to learn how operations work in the States. I kicked off the startup community, Hive, which is doing well. So I did many things in my life, and I was invited to some invitation-only conferences. I was put on the list of Frost's list of Poland's future richest, whatever that means. I was named one of the top women in tech in Europe. I had my picture taken by this famous star photographer, Kevin Abosch, and I saw it later appear on the NASDAQ screen, which was a nice thing to send to my parents and be able to say, hey, you know, it was worth to drop out of college, you know, we're actually doing something. So it seems very glamorous, right?
And I had a photographer come and do a photo shoot, and that ended up as a full page spread in Inc. magazine, which is one of the major business magazines in the States. So it's cool stuff. But you know, there's another side to entrepreneurship. And it's a side that you don't hear about nearly as much. And it's a much darker side. And so this is a quote from Elon Musk, founder of PayPal and Tesla and SpaceX. He said, "Starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss." And for those of you that don't know, an abyss is essentially a giant, dark, endless hole. So like it's a really dark concept. And we've found that this is actually a pretty apt description oftentimes. And so going back to that Amicus story, about a year ago, I was walking to a team meeting where I was going to announce that we were going to have to lay off nearly the entire company because we were running out of money unexpectedly, and it was all my fault. On the way to the meeting, our CTO turned to me and told me he was resigning. And after that, my co-founder, a friend of 11 years, told me he was resigning too. I had barely slept the night before, and it was hard to even process the news. I had really hit rock bottom. And this is an incredibly stressful moment, but the strange thing is that it's not so uncommon. It's actually so common that there is an acronym for it in the world of entrepreneurship. It's WFIO, W-F-I-O, and it stands for "We're fucked, it's over." Ben Horowitz, who is a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, one of the premier VCs in Silicon Valley, estimated that successful companies go from anywhere from 2 to 16 WFIOs through their lifetime. So this means that even a company that is succeeding has had a couple of moments where they've been near death, and these are really stressful times. Ella and I were lucky enough to go through this accelerator program, Y Combinator, which we mentioned, and one of the really cool things about YC is that they have these things called Tuesday dinners, where they bring in successful entrepreneurs and they have a strictly off-the-record conversation. So you get to hear from people like the founder of Facebook, the founder of Dropbox, the founder of Instagram, about their entrepreneurial journey. And one of the interesting things that you find is that all of these startups have been these huge ups and downs. And you learn that even startups that look like roller coasters, that look like rocket ships, are really roller coasters, right? Even the ones in the press, it just looks like they're shooting up and to the right, really have these huge swings up and huge swings down. And so it can be an incredibly stressful experience. And I know Ella has experienced this too.
Yeah, so remember that company that we got in with Y Combinator. So it was one of the most exciting experiences in my life at the time, but it turned out to be one of the most professionally challenging. I'm very grateful for it from this perspective, but let me just tell you the story. It was very different. It didn't have a near-death moment that kind of came upon me. But when we got to the program, the rules, we were super early. That was one of the projects we were working on, and something that I was personally very excited about and what I wanted to exist, a way to meta tag online content for attribution. And we applied really early, got in, and then everything starts happening very fast. Y Combinator is an accelerator. I remember talking about it with my friend and a startup and CEO coach, and also a New York City investor, Jerry Colonna, and he told me, oh, I'm not sure about that thing. You are a marathon runner, and accelerators are for sprinters. And I was like, no, Jerry, I'll be fine. I've done that before. I mean, I've iterated on products. I manage teams. What can go wrong? So you learn that you're getting in. Everything starts accelerating. And you're actually starting from a worse position. You have to deal with immigration. You have to find an apartment. You have to even figure out what Silicon Valley is, where you're going to find a place to stay. It's not easy to rent a house. So you're distracted by so many things. And then you start a program where everybody, 80 or so companies at the time, are pacing towards a demo day when they're going to raise millions of dollars from permanent investors. And you realize that you're so early, and we realize we're not growing fast enough. So I noticed that for the first time in my professional career, 6 years into running different things and really kind of dancing around with joy as I'm doing that, it was not an adventure. It felt like I'm in the middle of a box and I cannot get out of it. So I started being snappier at my team than I used to be. I started being more stressed. I started worrying more. And it's kind of normal. Most founders in Y Combinator actually experience anxiety, but I really remember that as an experienced by that time founder and an entrepreneur, I did not like what was happening, and I didn't think it was worth it. So, we had all that good momentum. We actually had very serious investor interest. We started raising around Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz that Seth mentioned. We had a conversation, he sent me an email. That's exactly what we were looking for. And then you're kind of, it seems like you're kind of governed by the forces beyond your control, and it's kind of already happening, and it doesn't seem like it's daily your choice to actually be doing that. So I remember I made one of the most difficult, but I think, and more challenging and shaping decisions of my life, and I decided, wow, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel like the way I would like to approach life and work. I think we should stop and rethink what we're doing. And I remember it's super hard to be pushing your team very hard for 3 months and then tell them, hey guys, let's take some time off. And that decision came after 2 sleepless nights and really worrying about the expectations that are set on me, and about the team that put so much heart into it, and just what's going to happen next. But I remember going on an offsite with the team. We went for a beautiful hike somewhere in Palo Alto, and they said, you know what, that feels like you again. It's actually a wise choice. I'm talking about it because I think there is not enough conversation about the fact that the emotional cost of entrepreneurship is real. I had the pleasure of working with many interesting founders and great, smart, driven intellectuals last year, and I guess also since I started Applicake and started Hive. And people struggle. Everyone struggles. Everyone has their ups and downs. It's an everyday decision not to give up. And we put so much heart into what we're doing that it's easy to lose perspective. So think about it. Even deciding what to do in life is hard. And taking on an entrepreneurial path is one of the most challenging things you can do. Likely your peers will choose safe goals, some safe career, they will go for some safer career choices. Maybe your loved ones and your parents will not even understand or support what you're doing. So it's a very lonely experience. And it's worth to remember that when we're deciding what to do in life, we're actually choosing over and over. So you will have a few of those moments, and it's kind of up to you what you're going to decide in those moments.
Yeah, and if you do decide to embark on an entrepreneurial journey, or really any journey where you're in a leadership position, you'll very quickly learn that leading people is really, really hard, and it's a really stressful thing. When you're a leader, you have to number one, recruit people who have the skills and the talents that your organization needs. And so this often involves going to people who might have jobs that they're pretty happy with. They might be very stable, high-paying, maybe they're in line for a promotion, and convincing those people to leave that life and come join you. Right? So you can see how you have a lot of responsibility now, because you're no longer just responsible for your own success, but you're responsible for the success of the people that you're leading. Once they do join your organization, you're then responsible for making sure they succeed there. You're responsible for mentoring them. You're responsible for making sure they achieve their full potential. You're responsible for making sure they're happy there. And these are all really difficult things, even in the best of times. But sometimes things go south. Firing someone when they're not doing their job well is incredibly difficult. Having to let people go because you've messed up is almost unbearable.
So, as you probably know, if you have some entrepreneur experience, the daily struggle of the daily reality of running a startup or being involved in any project is that there are many, many things to do and many, many problems and only small wins. Like you're pacing towards a goal that's not always often well defined, but there are financial problems, there are team problems, there's competitors coming up. It actually never ends because by definition you're trying to achieve something, so you have to shape the world, and to shape the world you have to fight against the status quo.
And in a startup, the unknowns sort of greatly outweigh the knowns, right? So you don't know if you can make a product. You don't know if you make that product, if people will use it. You don't know if people use it, if they'll pay for it. You don't know if they'll pay for it, how much they'll pay for it. You don't know if you get people to pay for it, if people will give you money to fund your company. You don't know if you get the money, if you can recruit developers. There's just all these unknowns, and these unknowns can be incredibly stressful.
Yeah, one thing that I found particularly challenging is that there's always something to do. It's not like you can tell yourself, okay, this is, I'm kind of done with this task, because you can always improve. So it kind of boils down to how disciplined you can be about, okay, this is what I'm setting my goal. This is the goal that I'm setting for myself. And when it's done, I'm going to stop and rest. Like how good you are at telling, no, this is the moment that I have to leave and see my friends, because you will start sacrificing your personal time and your personal relationships. You will build VC relationships, partner relationship, and all those other relationships that are actually not necessarily meaningful for you in terms of emotional stability. So you will notice that, once your friends invite you for a party, or maybe there's some important family occasion and you're going to miss it, and then you miss it again and you feel bad about it, but it's just temporary because, it only takes 7 to 10 years to build a startup, and then, you'll have all the time in the world, but suddenly you realize you need more and more emotional support from your peer networks, from the real, true, not the customer and the VC networks, but you will actually notice that people don't invite you to things anymore because you're never there, and so why would somebody bother? And even if things are going well, you will find, we're very tricky creatures, we'll find a way to attribute our success to external circumstances. You will feel like you're not the person for the job. You will feel like everybody on your team realizes that you're faking it. So there's so much happening.
Yeah, and there's a friend of mine worked for a financial firm called Bridgewater, and they had a saying, which was that 99% right is 100% wrong, right? Because they have zero tolerance for getting something wrong, because that 1% wrong could cost them literally $1 billion. But in the world of startups, 20% right is pretty good, right? Because things are so difficult, because there are so many unknowns, if for every test you're running, 1 out of 5 is a success, then you're doing really well. And so you really have to get used to sort of constant failure and constant failing and be comfortable with that, which is hard.
Okay, so where does it take us? It takes us to something that maybe we're not that very good at noticing. It takes us to anxiety. And probably you're not daily checking yourself for, do I have symptoms of anxiety? But maybe you should. So if you find yourself, slightly nervous at times, or maybe more alert, without really a possibility of relaxing, And if you find some maybe mild problems in falling asleep or not being able to quiet your mind from the tasks that seem to be running through your head, maybe you have some slight muscular tensions, some mild back pains or head pains or stomach aches. These are all symptoms of anxiety. And sometimes, you know, we all experience that. There are stressful times in our lives, but it's important to monitor if that happens for a prolonged period of times, because I'm betting at least half of you are probably living in that mode as your most default mode, and it's not normal. And why is that important?
Well, so it's important because prolonged anxiety can lead to more serious things like depression. And the first thing I want to say is that depression is a very real thing. So this is actually a neurochemical state in the brain that you can detect with a PET scan. So this on the left is a brain that is a sort of healthy brain, and on the right is a depressed brain. And they all sort of look like this, right? And so I'm only showing this to drive home the fact that this is a real thing. It exists in the world. It's not some sort of made-up condition. And it's really important that we all recognize this because if you see the signs of depression in someone, it's treatable, right? If they get help, if they start exercising, if they diet well, you can beat depression, right? And so I'm going to put up the signs. This is the most words I've ever put on a slide. But I really do think it's important that everyone see these symptoms so that you can not only see and recognize it in yourself, but in those around you. So some of the symptoms are constant anxiety, constant fatigue, difficulty concentrating or making decisions, feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness, feelings of emptiness or guilt. Have you guys ever just like not want to get out of bed, be like, oh, just today forget about it, right? If you feel that over and over again, that's a pretty good sign that you might be depressed. And again, it's really important that people know these symptoms and recognize them in others because depression is easily treatable, but it can lead, if left untreated, to more serious things. So some people are just so focused on what they're doing, they keep plowing through, and it can lead to suicidal thoughts. And unfortunately, in the entrepreneurial community, this has become a problem recently. A few people have committed suicide, including someone that I was quite friendly with. And so I really, again, want to drive home that you should look at those around you. And this community of like high-achieving, A players who are really driven, unfortunately, is the community that these things affect the most.
So luckily, a few people in let's call it international startup community have been talking about it. So Brad Feld, a famous, prominent U.S. investor, started talking about his own depression, and then it triggered many entrepreneurs to start talking about theirs. And actually, it's a very common condition. So just Google entrepreneurial depression, and the Google search is actually growing. So recently, also talk about founder suicides, and there's been suicides of founders who felt overwhelmed and trapped in kind of the cage of their own creation within the most prominent startup networks. So that's something we should actively scan for, and we should ask people those questions. Are you feeling depressed? Like, do you think you need help? So yeah, it's gotten pretty dark, but we're about to get to the how to fix all this stuff. So the first way you can defeat all these things, the first way you can start to learn how to strive through stress is to understand the enemy, right? This little bastard is the enemy. This guy is called cortisol. It's a stress hormone, and it's basically released anytime the body is going through stress. And it does a lot of things to the body. It's released by the adrenal cortex. It increases blood sugar levels. It increases blood pressure. It basically does a lot of things that are super useful if you're trying to escape a charging bear, but are not very well suited to the modern world. And so step 2, now that we know who the enemy is to learn how to defeat the enemy. So it's basic public speaking that you're supposed to try and please your audience, right? I want to make you guys happy. So here goes my attempt to make you guys really happy. I'm going to let you know that if you want to succeed in life, you should sleep more, you should go on vacation, you should dance till you drop, and you should get lots of massages. Huh? Not bad, right? Yeah, okay, good. So actually, this isn't just my attempt at being a good public speaker, it's science. Science actually says that all of these things will make you more successful in life.
All of these things will help defeat that little bastard that we talked about, cortisol. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through some actual scientific studies that show that each of these things will help you excel through stress. So this one is a study, and there are a number of studies like this that shows that sleeping makes you smarter. It's really that simple. Sleeping boosts your intelligence. As you sleep, your brain actually replays the events of the day and tries to figure things out. So there's a lot of stories in mathematics where a mathematician will wake from sleep or wake from a nap and go, aha, eureka, I've got it. And they'll have solved some mathematical theorem that they've been working on. These are not stories. This actually happens. So in the lab, they've given people tests where throughout the day, they have them practice doing a different set of keystrokes on a computer that they've never done before. And then they have one group sleep for 9 hours, one group sleep for 8 hours, one for 7. And the people that sleep for 9 hours do better than the people that sleep for 8, do better than the people that sleep for 7. So sleeping will make you smarter. It also makes you more creative. So they've essentially run the same exact studies in the lab, but instead of using very rote tasks, like a series of keys on a keyboard, they give you creative tasks. So things like mathematics, or there's this area called divergent thinking, right? So they'll give someone a paper clip, and they'll say, tell me all of the possible use cases of this paper clip that you can think of in the next 5 minutes, right? And so people say, okay, well, you could keep pieces of paper together with it. You could unwind it and use it to get the SIM card out of your phone. You could turn it into cufflinks. You could unwind it and make a nose ring out of it, right? And things like this. And the more you sleep, the more creative you are. Here's a really cool one. There's an increasing body of evidence to show that you will be more productive and more successful if you go on vacation. And so this is an interesting area because I hear all the time, I can't go on vacation. I got so much to do. I got to do this. I got to do that. I don't have time. For me, this is a lot like someone saying, you know what, I don't have time to eat today. I got to get all this stuff done. I don't have time to eat tomorrow. I'm just going to keep on working. Like, sure, you could do that, but then you're going to end up collapsing, right? And you're not going to be very productive at all. So vacation makes you more productive when you're not on vacation and actually boosts overall productivity and health. This is a really cool one. This is from the psychology department at Frankfurt University, and it shows that dancing in a significant way reduces cortisol levels in the brain. Cortisol is this thing that we're trying to get rid of. So if you're feeling super stressed, get a group of your friends together, go to the club and get down, do the tango, whatever you like. This is also a really nice one. Frequent massages reduce cortisol levels and keep them down. So if you want to do nothing else, a simple thing for you to do to increase your success is to schedule every other week a massage for yourself. Just get an hour massage. And literally just by laying down and getting massaged, you will be reducing your cortisol levels and thereby increasing your intelligence, increasing your creativity, increasing your tolerance to stress.
Yeah, just a personal plug here regarding dancing. That's been said before by Alex, if he's still here. I dance contemporary dance. And after YC, the next kind of summer after that, when I could finally take some time off, I went on a sabbatical, 3 months extended time off, and I actually went to New York and signed up for a contemporary dance school, and I just danced for 3 months, and it was amazing. And I think I would recommend anyone extended vacation and kind of incorporating exercise, your hobby, or dance, and really helping yourself rewire your brain. And talking about rewiring your brain, so I've been doing yoga on and off since I was 16, so for a long time now. But part of yoga is actually meditation, and right now there's a growing body of research on mindfulness meditation when some old wisdom is actually being neurologically confirmed. So this particular type of meditation called mindfulness meditation, which is kind of starts from sitting down every day for 20 minutes, kind of on your chair. You don't have to, do the whole Zen spiel, and just observing what's happening in your brain and trying to see thoughts, let them go, see feelings, let them go, and kind of realizing that we are computers that have pretty random processing going on, but not trying to hold on to what's happening there. And there's amazing study. There's a recent study that shows that even after 4 days of 20 minutes of meditation, you can start seeing effects on your brain. And 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation, 20 minutes a day, can help you rewire your brain. It actually reduces on MRI scans the areas of your brain that are associated that show anxiety. It helps you improve your memory.
It increases the density of the gray matter area of your brain, and so gray matter is where the neuron cell bodies are. So it actually increases the density of the part of the brain that has all of your neuron cells.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. And most people, when they sit down, probably many, I mean, hopefully for some of you, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do that, and you should, because it's the best thing you're going to do for yourself. But many people I talk to don't know how to start. So I found this book pretty helpful. It's written by a Harvard clinical psychologist who teaches psychology, but also was doing clinical research on the benefits of meditation and stress reduction. And so you can read that book. It's pretty short. Or you can also download the Headspace app. It's pretty amazing. Everybody, you can choose how much time you want to spend meditating. It's guided meditation, so a friendly guy called Andy tells you, sit down now, try to relax and try to observe your thoughts. And the thing is, you're going to be failing at it for the first many times you're doing it, but it's just about the discipline. So I think that's the main, we're not done yet, but that's the main message that we have for you. Entrepreneurship takes a lot of discipline. Like, this is your hardware, this is your software. You're not going to go beyond that. That doesn't scale. If you're not compassionate, and if you're not, if you're not able to manage yourself, you're not going to be able to manage people. You have to put in calendar, this is vacation time, this is my friend's time, this is my meditation 20 minutes, which is going to give you so much more clarity in what you're doing every day, and will give you more perspective on like how much really that stupid inbox queue matters. And this is my exercise time, and you have to plan for that.
So now we're going to go over what we're calling the 4 Ps. Paul Graham, passion, purpose, and perspective. So Paul Graham, for those of you who don't know, founded Y Combinator, the accelerator that we've mentioned before. And so during YC, you're essentially sprinting for 3 months, and you're supposed to focus on nothing but building your business. You're supposed to focus on nothing but your startup. And they teach you that one of the hardest things is saying no to things, right? And so they give you an easy rubric. They say, if you're ever not sure if you're doing the right thing, ask yourself this question. Say, am I talking to my users? Am I building my product? Am I exercising? Right? So this program where you're supposed to do nothing but build your business, even then they say you got to carve out time to exercise. And I could have thrown up that there's been dozens and dozens of studies since the 1950s showing that exercise also reduces cortisol, but that's sort of old news. So this is a quote from Steve Jobs. He said, if you're not passionate enough from the start, you'll never stick it out. And stick it out is an idiom meaning you'll never sort of follow through with what you're doing. And I think this is very true. Entrepreneurship often gets hard. Like, it will guaranteed get hard. And so if you don't really care about what you're doing, then it's just not going to make sense for you, right? And so what I would advise everyone to do is find something that's really annoyed you for a while and try and solve that. Try and figure out something that you just definitely know needs to exist in the world, and focus on building that, because then at least when things get really hard, you'll understand why you're doing what you're doing. Most important, I think, is purpose. This guy Seth Bannon made this quote: "Purpose lifts us up when times are good and gives struggle meaning when life gets tough." I think this is probably the most important thing that we can all find in our careers. It's sort of like a higher purpose, right? We want to know that what we're doing is really important. And if you can't answer that question, if someone comes up to you and says, why is what you're doing really important, and you don't just sort of immediately have an answer to that, then you should really question if you're doing the right thing. Right? So for me, my purpose comes from what happened to my mother, right? I really want to empower people who are trying to change the world for the better. Right? In the same way that I wanted to empower her. And for me, it gives my life meaning every day. It means that when things get tough, I can push through because I have this sort of higher purpose. And then perspective.
And then it's perspective. Often we talk to entrepreneurs who, if you ask them why they're doing what they're doing, they're not sure. And when you hear them speak, it's unclear if they really want to be doing that. So I think one important thing to remember is, maybe you woke up, you were born thinking about, oh, I'm going to do this in life. But probably, statistically, pretty randomly, you were put in this school and you met those people, and some circumstances led you to do what you're doing right now. And you have to remember that it's your creation. You have the right to decide when it's no longer serving you or when you want to start doing something completely else, because you only have a single track in life, and your decision about not continuing to do something is just as important as the decision of sticking with it. So remember, your career will be a marathon too, and which direction you're shooting yourself in is very important. So you might be thinking you're struggling and you don't know exactly why you're even on that path anymore. So maybe it's time to take a step back and see if you're climbing the right mountain. And I mentioned Jerry Colonna before, and one of the useful resources that I think I want to share with you is his blog and podcast, and they also do leadership training, which is pretty expensive and not very accessible because it's in the States, but the blog and podcasts are great. They give you a lot of leadership advice. They give you those resources can help you understand that you're not alone in that experience, and actually will help you approach the problems you're solving from a bigger perspective of the picture of your life, not the picture of what my friends are going to think about me in a year. And a book that I have recommended to multiple people, maybe 25 times last year, I started counting yesterday, and it's a Buddhist perspective on dealing with change. It's not just for those people for whom things really fall apart. It's for everyone for whose some circumstances are no longer true, which means some part of your identity, which was based on some assumptions, can no longer be maintained. And then how do you deal with change? And this is an amazing book of just approaching change as and managing the change of your life in a more kind of self-loving and smarter way that helps you thrive in your career, be more productive, and help you maintain more of those brain cells that are very important for us.
Yeah, and so that, in a nutshell, is how you eat glass. Thanks.
So we still have time for some questions. So guys, I need my mic. There we go. Thank you, sir. So any questions here? Come on, guys. It's in the morning, so there's no freaking excuse not to ask questions. There we go.
Right, guys. Hi.
Hi.
So you're saying it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? But on the other hand, you're launching a VC fund, which is extreme, right? So what do you plan to do with entrepreneurs that will come to you? How will you work? I guess you will be a little bit different from the other VC funds that don't care about that, right?
He's basically asking if you're going to hurt startups and whip them or something.
I think it's a great question. I actually don't think it's different. We talk about it a lot, and when you work with entrepreneurs and you invest in companies, I think it's your moral obligation to be asking that question, what type of kind of leader you want to be for them, or what type of, maybe not leader but what type of coach you want to be for them, or resource or help. And no, it's not. Building a startup, we have those 1-year successes, 3-year exits, but usually it's a 10-year experience. It takes really a lot of time to get something to, especially a venture-backed business, which usually requires a bit higher numbers at the exit or at the IPO or at the sale. So if somebody is not able to manage themselves properly, they're not going to be able to run for 10 years. They're going to crash. Their processor will going to crash. And they're going to cause a lot of self-harm. They're going to cause a lot of turmoil. And they're not going to be making good decisions. It's part of the game to be able to be very disciplined about your health and your personal life too.
I agree with everything Ela just said, but one of the developers at Amicus used to be a college track star. He was a sprinter, and so he talks a lot about sprinting, and he learned about how Olympic athletes train for sprinting. And even Olympic sprinters, whose literally their job is to just run as fast as possible, will train and then take 16 hours of rest, right? So they do their training and then they just do nothing but sleep for like 16 hours. And so, even these guys are taking lots of rest, they're looking after their body, they're doing all these things. And so if an Olympic athlete whose job it is to run really fast does this stuff, then maybe it makes sense for an entrepreneur who's trying to move really fast to do this stuff too.
So also founder conflict is a very often cause for like early stage startups to like kind of it's a cause of failure. And really, when you have people who know how to communicate, who are compassionate, and who are able to keep their stress levels down, you actually are able to build a way stronger foundation. It's very important at any stage. You should never have prolonged periods of sprints.
Okay, short answer so we can get more questions. Another question, guys. Don't let me now bad. Okay, only if there's no other questions. Come on, guys. No one?
Was that helpful? Like, could anyone relate to that experience? Raise your hand if you could relate to some of that experience.
I love it. I love this crowd. It's like they really love what you're talking about, but they won't make any.
Who's going to either sleep
Boris,
more?
You want to ask something?
Who's going to either sleep more, dance more, get more massages, exercise more?
Me.
Yeah, massages, guys. Like it really. I mean, there's a financial cost there, but.
Right. A follow-up question to that. Do you plan to have a certain process in your fund that will deal with these kind of things? Like, do you have it planned, or will you just rely on intuition of yeah?
It's.
I think it's just advice. It's just telling people, right? Like we've both had periods in our life where we didn't follow these things and hit a wall. Right, and when you hit, I've probably burned out like twice in my life, big time. And when that happens, you're just done for months, right? And that's really bad for your business. I know Ela has also felt this, and so just sharing your personal story and then sharing how you actually like overcame these things is, I think, the best way of helping founders avoid these traps.
The most amazing thing, actually, about especially meditation is that the natural state of our brain, neurologically, like it's joy. It's like bliss at, oh my God, there's so much happening in the world. There's some amazing detail in that column, but we don't hear that. Like our brain really gets affected by the plague of cortisol, and when your mind is racing, like shooting random processes through your neural pathways, which are thoughts, but you're not able to stop them. You stop living in that kind of sense of joy, and most people, you're just not able to be as creative. And I mean, I think it's just something that it's just such an important life skill to be able to give to people that like it would be just miserable not to share it every day. And then you just have better human beings to work with, and hopefully they spread the message, because it's so easy to start a startup, it's so easy to raise money, it's so software startups are so cheap, and there are all those great successes and those success stories, but everybody struggles and nobody is happy. So it's actually some weird situation that we're putting ourselves in when we're like deciding that for years and years on our life we're sacrificing personal happiness and contentment for this unattainable goal of there's going to be this exit, and then I'm going to be in the press, and it's going to be over. And it's not going to be. You're killing your brain out doing that.
Yeah. So I think our point is also that you can have all those things without sacrificing happiness and contentment if you do it right.
Yeah.
Last question by Mr. Boris.
Thanks for the talk. I could relate to every slide, so that was pretty helpful. I mean, I'm sure it's pretty helpful to everyone. So the question to me, so you go to parties, like startup parties, like you meet people, and everyone is super happy, and everyone's talking, wow, my startup is growing so fast, it's so amazing, and everyone's lying. So how can we fix that?
I don't think it's lying. I think it's A, part of selling, B, there are always good things to relate.
I think that, unfortunately, I don't think you're ever going to fix that, right? Because the nature of the world, it's a small world, and you don't know if the person you're talking to works at Sequoia or Andreessen, right? And that you're just going to like kill your chance of funding. So I think at the party circuit, how are you doing? Great, right? I don't think we're ever really going to fix that. But I think what we can fix is to make sure that people have support networks, right? So like one of the greatest things about YC is that you're introduced into this network of alumni, right? Who are all struggling just like you're struggling. And those connections you can tweak to sort of be more honest and more pure, right? So like I'm able to admit things to another, a founder about how things are falling apart. I think, oh my God, I think things are falling apart at Amicus, and they're able to tell me, oh my God, I think things are falling apart here. And we're able to help each other through that and support each other both emotionally and sort of professionally. And I think that's sort of how you fix this problem, is to connect entrepreneurs to other entrepreneurs who they can be more honest with and open with.
Yeah, I think teaching people also more, teaching people communication and like being able to put things in perspective better would be a good skill. But just talking about it and having more people talk about it and understanding that when people say things are great, that means some things are going great and that's what we're holding on to as we're on that weird, crazy ride. But many things are falling apart. And I think it's also important to ask people, how are you doing? And a very important question, asking people, hey, have you been anxious recently? Have you been depressed recently? Have you been exercising? Have you been meditating? Have you been sleeping a lot? And it's like a mantra I started asking all my friends, and we got a few of our friends to like start meditating with Headspace, and it's especially for very intelligent, highly motivated people, there's so much happening in your brain, and it's really difficult to kind of stop your brain from shooting those neurons. Yeah?
So I actually do martial art as a way of doing that, so I'm gonna whack you if you guys don't shut up. So, Ela, Seth, thank you very much for your talk. It was really helpful, actually. I'm a huge fan of this stuff. Guys, big applause for them.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for the questions, for being there.